The baseline reality of international relations is anarchy. There is no global police force, no global emergency response system, and no overarching world government with the authority to command sovereign states. States manage this anarchy through a network of over 75,000 international organizations. These entities operate across borders to facilitate the daily functions of the modern world. Within this network, the load-bearing pillars of global governance are intergovernmental organizations, or IGOs. These are formal entities created by treaties between states, possessing their own permanent secretariat and a distinct legal personality. These organizations manage tens of billions of dollars in annual budgets and employ hundreds of thousands of civil servants across every continent. This raises a central question. Why do states, which are fiercely protective of their independent sovereignty, build and fund institutions that constrain their own power? The realist perspective argues that these organizations are instruments used by powerful states. In this view, international institutions merely reflect the existing distribution of military and economic power. Liberal institutionalists see a different function. As this diagram shows, they view institutions as engineering tools built to reduce transaction costs. By centralizing communication, they replace a chaotic web of bilateral agreements with efficient shared routes. These organizations act as neutral monitors. By providing reliable information and tracking compliance, they help states overcome the fear of cheating that often prevents international cooperation. Constructivist scholars focus on how these organizations act as norm entrepreneurs. They introduce new behaviors and standards that gradually change what states consider to be legitimate conduct. International organizations are structural mechanisms designed to solve complex collective action problems that no single state can manage alone. Modern global governance began as a series of structural iterations. The 1815 Concert of Europe established an ad hoc diplomatic mechanism among major powers, but it lacked the permanence to manage long-term stability. In the 1860s, states built public international unions to handle technical, cross-border logistics. Organizations like the International Telegraph Union and the Universal Postal Union were the first to manage global wires and mail routes through a permanent bureaucracy. After World War I, the League of Nations represented the first attempt at a permanent diplomatic forum for collective security. The League's structure contained a fatal flaw, the unanimity rule. As illustrated here, the organization required absolute consensus for any action. A single red light from any member could break the circuit and stop the enforcement mechanism entirely. Internal paralysis was matched by external weakness. The United States refused to join the organization, and the League lacked a standing military force to punish aggressive states. By prioritizing absolute state equality over the realities of power, the League became unable to act, leading to its collapse at the start of World War II. In 1945, the architects of the United Nations abandoned the requirement for absolute equality. They re-engineered the system to ensure that the world's major military powers would remain committed to the institution. This redesign centered on the UN Security Council. It is the only international body with the legal authority to issue binding resolutions and authorize the use of military force. This security flowchart demonstrates the P5 veto. While 15 nations sit on the Council, 5 permanent members act as absolute gatekeepers. A single veto drops like a blast door, halting any action the Council attempts to take. This institutionalized inequality ensures that the world's strongest militaries will never face an enforcement action they cannot control, preventing them from abandoning the system entirely. The practical output of this security architecture is the deployment of neutral peacekeeping forces. These missions act as a buffer in post-conflict zones, managing regional crises without triggering direct wars between major powers. The UN architecture manages a balance of power to prevent a Third World War. It is an engineering solution to the problem of great power conflict. Parallel to the security system, the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference established a financial architecture to stabilize the global economy. Delegates from across the geopolitical spectrum met to forge a system that would prevent another Great Depression. This architecture created 2 distinct roles. The IMF acts as a global financial firefighter, providing short-term loans to manage monetary crises. The World Bank focuses on long-term development, funding infrastructure from roads to power grids. The system was later expanded to include the World Trade Organization, which provides a rule-based framework for resolving trade disputes between nations. These economic institutions established the standardized rules that enabled decades of global trade expansion and predictable financial flows. Most international organizations are intergovernmental, meaning states retain their full sovereignty. The European Union is the primary exception, operating as a supranational organization. The EU evolved from a narrow post-war trade pact into a political and economic union where member states explicitly trade their sovereignty for deeper integration. This integration is driven by the acquis communautaire. This massive body of common rights and obligations is legally binding on all EU members, creating a shared legal foundation for the entire union. This legal flowchart shows the power of the supranational model. EU central directives flow downward, explicitly replacing national laws to enforce a single market and a common currency. The EU demonstrates that deep governance is possible, but it requires member states to surrender their independent sovereign authority to a central institution. Modern global governance is defined by the implementation gap. This is the structural disconnect between the rules organizations set and their ability to enforce them. While institutions can establish global norms, they lack independent militaries or police forces. They remain entirely dependent on sovereign states to carry out their decisions. This dependency leads to gridlock. The UN Security Council is frequently paralyzed during major conflicts, as permanent members use their veto power to protect their specific national interests. The World Trade Organization faces a similar struggle. Its dispute settlement system has been stalled by the intentional blocking of judge appointments, leaving international trade rules without an active enforcement mechanism. This institutional gridlock has fueled a domestic political backlash. Populist and nationalist movements now actively campaign to reclaim sovereign power from international bureaucracies. The system built in 1945 is struggling to manage the same power politics it was designed to contain. The transition to a multipolar world is fragmenting the post-war institutional monopoly. As the network map shows, new hubs are appearing. Groups like the expanded BRICS coalition and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank offer alternative models for economic and political coordination. Modern challenges like climate change and artificial intelligence present a new problem. These borderless threats scale at a speed traditional treaties struggle to match. The consensus-based processes developed in the 20th century are ill-equipped for the non-physical and rapidly accelerating crises of the 21st. International organizations are flawed and dependent on the political will of sovereign states. Yet, as we face planetary-scale challenges, they remain the only engineered mechanisms humanity possesses to manage our shared existence between borders.